Okay, we begin in Washington, where President Donald Trump is uttering more threats against Canada and talking about who should run Canada. The CBC's Richard Madden is on this. He joins us from Washington, D.C. live. Richard, this all happened on Fox News because, of course. So let's start with what Trump is saying about Canada's political leaders.
Yeah, hey, David. Well, we've heard President Trump use Canada as a punching bag, but I think this is the first time we've seen him and heard him fully inject himself into Canadian politics. Now, Fox News host Laura Ingraham was delicately trying to press him on how his hostilities towards Canada are actually helping the Liberals. We've seen polls showing the Liberals rebounding from the once double-digit lead held by the Conservatives. And take a listen to how Trump responded.
The Liberal Party is going to win now in the next election, most likely. And they were down and out. Isn't that going to make them more hostile to us and possibly
I'd rather deal with a liberal than a
for
conservative.
China, closer to Canada, and that would really put us in a bind.
The conservative that's running is stupidly no friend of mine. I don't know him, but he said negative things. So when he says negative things, I couldn't care less. I think it's easier to deal actually with a liberal. And maybe they're going to win, but I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me at all.
So, yeah, that was stunning. Now, David, we've heard other members of Trump's cabinet accuse the Liberals of using Trump's tariffs for their own political gain. But clearly, the White House and the administration are doing it, too. Some of my political contacts here have mused that Trump's strategy to weigh in on Canadian politics is a way to juice up his own base because it's a lot easier to attack a Liberal than a conservative. Now, I should also mention, not everyone in the MAGA base is buying it. We heard radio host Joe Rogan recently calling Trump's attacks against Canada ridiculous, and we've seen other Republicans kind of sloughing it off. But the fact that Trump is now weighing in on Canada's pending election is likely another factor the leaders up there are using to their advantage, and you played some of it just moments ago.
Yeah, it's interesting here that the Fox News decision desk is predicting a Liberal victory on election night when we don't even know the date. But, you know, Trump also is, again, Richard, talking about Canada becoming the 51st state. I mean, he said this more than once in the interview. What stood out this particular time?
Yeah, and also look at the betting markets, too, because those movements, those have had some movements, too. You know, as for this 51st state, you know, we've heard this before. It's gone from trolling, but now is Trump serious? We heard how Trump say he would use economic force against Canada, and these tariffs are likely the starting point. But once again, host Laura Ingraham gently pushed Trump on why he has it out for Canada, and here's how he responded. Listen.
Look, I deal with every country, indirectly or directly. One of the nastiest countries to deal with is Canada. They make a lot of millions of automobiles are sent in. I'd rather have them made in Michigan. I'd rather have them made in South Carolina or any one of our...
You're tougher with Canada than you are with some of our biggest adversaries.
Only because it's meant to be our 51st state.
So Canada nastier than, I don't know, North Korea, Iran, like actual adversaries. So that was stunning as well. But we are seeing Trump really escalating his harsh rhetoric and hostilities against Canada. So that said, I wouldn't be surprised if we'll hear more of this annexation talk and trashing Canada in the middle of the campaign once Canada's election gets underway up there.
Yeah, it's going to be soon. It's a wild election coming. All right, Richard, thank you so much. This is CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has been quick to use U.S. President Trump's latest comments about the Liberals against them. Today, Poilievre said that Trump endorsed Liberal leader Mark Carney and agreed that a Liberal would be easier for Trump to deal with.
On that point, it's true. I'm a strong leader. I'm a tough guy to deal with. I'm firm in my convictions, and I'll always put Canada first. By contrast, in 10 years, the Liberals have blocked resource projects, hiked taxes, and driven $500 billion of investment to the U.S.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Melanie Joly joins me now. Minister, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Good to see you.
You've heard what Donald Trump had to say in that interview, that it's easier to deal with the liberal, as he called him, than the conservative. I mean, that sounds like the president thinks your government will be easier to deal with than a conservative government. What do you think?
Well, my job is not to comment on what President Trump prefers. My job is to say what I think Canadians prefer. And what they prefer is actually an adult in the room to deal with a president that can be sometimes very unpredictable, and that a president that has been stating that he would annex Canada, and also a president that has been clear in terms of imposing unjustifiable and of course unjustified tariffs against us. So I think that the rhetoric that Poilievre is using right now just doesn't stand. And I don't think it has any credibility in the eyes of Canadians.
But when the president says, I think the Liberal will be easier to deal with, what do you think Canadians infer from that?
I think our job right now is to defend Canadian jobs and Canadian way of life. It's clearly not to have somebody that mimics President Trump and has been mimicking a lot of the MAGA movement for too many years. And that has been creating a lot of frustration also amongst Canadians that are worried that what is happening south of the border will happen now in Canada. So I think at the end of the day, when election starts, and they will start at one point, the question will be who can handle better the Canada-US relationship. And I think we've been showing steady, leadership on it, steadfast, support towards Canadians. And I think that the country is united. And to be frank, I think that if you forget politics just a second, and I know this show is called Power and Politics, Canadians just want us to be doing the work to make sure that they're safe, that they have a job, and that ultimately Canada is well protected. And I hear so much anxiety across the country, and so many people that are worried. Well, we're there, we're doing the job, and we'll continue to do the job.
Okay, well, it sounds like election, though, is coming very soon. We showed a picture earlier in the show. I think you might have still been in the cabinet meeting. It's your campaign bus. It's being wrapped up and prepped in a garage in Mississauga. So that tells us it's coming soon. The other thing that's coming soon is the April 2nd reciprocal tariff deadline in the United States, right?
Yeah.
So we've heard from cabinet representatives in the United States saying they're going to put those tariffs in place, and then countries can sort of bargain trade-offs, essentially, to have them come down. How does the government of Canada do that if we're in the middle of an election campaign on the 2nd of April?
First and foremost, we will be ready. So we've said already that we would be imposing tariffs counter tariffs against the tariffs imposed on us. We've already imposed $60 billion worth of tariffs. We already said also that there was $100 billion more that we were ready, that we were putting in the window, and there's already consultations that are happening as we speak on it. So we've done the work. Meanwhile, we've said we would be there for workers. So we'll make sure that workers are well supported. And meanwhile, we will continue to engage with the U.S. administration. I was with Secretary of State Rubio last week. I've been in contact with him over the weekend, and I'll continue to engage. And I was on the phone with Lindsey Graham this morning. And, I know that my colleagues are also in contact with key interlocutors within the Trump administration. We are doing the job.
But the $125 billion, the second tranche of the tariffs that were announced by the former Prime Minister, they're on hold right now because of the pause on some of the tariffs from President Trump. If we get to a point, though, in April, when the pause comes off or the reciprocal tariffs go in, can you move ahead with that second wave of tariffs if we're in a caretaker government because of an election campaign, or does it have to wait?
Of course, because ultimately we are the government, and ultimately our job is to defend the national interest of Canadians. And that's what we'll do. And that's why we've put everything in the window to make sure that we would be able to do so. We know what are the dates. We knew that there was the first executive order linked to fentanyl, which was, we all know, a bogus argument to impose 25% tariffs on our goods. Now, we've been able to pause a part of it. And meanwhile, we knew that the steel and aluminum sector would be targeted, not only the Canadian one, but also around the world. So we work with our European friends on the other side of the Atlantic to make sure we would have countermeasures, counter tariffs together. That's what we did. And there will be more to announce before the end of the week, because ultimately, and I've been saying that in every single interview, David, we need to win the hearts and minds of American people. Right now, we're seeing that it is having an impact. Americans are preoccupied. They know that this is costing more for them at the pump, at the grocery store, or just generally when they buy a house or they want to do renovations. And so this affordability issue that we're seeing also in the US is gaining ground, and we need to make sure that we have the American people saying to their House representatives, their senators, their governors, ultimately the Trump administration, it's enough.
So more to announce by the end of the week, as in more retaliatory measures to the U.S. or more supports for Canadian workers? It just wasn't quite clear on what you meant there.
More to do to make sure that Americans know what President Trump is doing, and I'll keep that.
Okay, it's like a communications effort? Is that
I'll
what
have
you're...
more to say.
Okay, all right. Well, all right. Trump had more to say last night about Canada becoming a 51st state, which I know Prime Minister Carney has said that's the kind of thing that needs to stop, before they'll sit down and have a proper conversation about things. One of the issues he talks about is military spending. There's reporting in the New York Times saying that Canada is prepared to join the European Union in a military industry buildup, essentially forming a defense partnership where Canadian defense suppliers get access to the European market and back and forth. How serious is that? How advanced are those talks?
This is very serious. We've been in talks with the European Union to make sure that we could work on defense procurement together. We already have a free trade agreement with the European Union. Our ambassador at the European Union, Eilish Campbell, has been in close contact with also Ursula von der Leyen, so the president of the European team. I went a month ago to Europe to make sure that we could be part of that partnership. Former Prime Minister Trudeau did so at the time, and I think it's yielding towards good news, because ultimately we need to make sure that we can be closer to the Europeans as we're developing new partnerships. And we know that we're over-reliant right now on the U.S., on different aspects of our relationship, including defense procurement. And so that was part of my conversations also at the G7 last week when I was with the different foreign ministers of the EU.
When Bill Blair was here on Friday, and he said that in his first meeting with Mark Carney, after they were all sworn in, that the Prime Minister asked him to review the F-35 contract.
Yeah, I was in that meeting.
So is this part of that looking to Europe maybe for Saab Gripens instead of buying all the F-35s? Is this the sort of thing we're talking about, or is this another path for other purchases?
I have too much respect for my fantastic colleague, Minister of Defense Bill Blair, to answer that question for him. But what I can tell you, though, is that we need to be able to have many options. And so I won't comment on what he has said regarding the F-35s, because I think it was a sound decision for the Prime Minister to ultimately ask for a review. But meanwhile, the defense industry here at home needs to be built. We need to work on our own defense industry, and we need to find different partners around the world.
But it is difficult to contemplate Canada buying military hardware for its national security from a country where the leadership is openly talking about annexation. I mean, do you still believe, does Prime Minister Carney believe, as Prime Minister Trudeau has suggested, that annexation is still the ultimate goal here?
We've said it many times that we think it is not only the ultimate goal, but it's being repeated every single time President Trump talks about Canada. So this is our sovereignty. We don't question it. We don't, laugh about it. This is something that must be respected at all times. So based on that, we'll take decisions, and we need to have options. Based on that, also, we worked on having a strong EU partnership on defense.